Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar of how to buy a home in The Hague. We just waited a few more minutes to give the chance to everyone to join. Can you just please confirm in the chat, can you hear me and see me properly? And can you also see the screen? Just let me know so I know that everyone can see and hear clearly and also see the screen that we're sharing. Yes, all good. Perfect. Thank you very much. Today, my colleague Rick will be in the chat as well. So if you have any questions while we're doing this presentation, just pop your question in the Q&A, and then we'll pick it up from there. At the end, we'll also have a Q&A session just to go through any questions that we haven't answered. So with that being said, just to move forward, my name is Katie. I'm a buying manager with Expat Housing Network. I originally come from Cyprus and I'm half Cypriot and half British. I was born and raised in Cyprus though. And I do have to say that I live in Rotterdam and I have found my way away from home here. I generally work in the southern part of the Netherlands, and that includes, of course, the Rotterdam and the Hague regions, and of course, anything in between. So let's just get to know you a little bit. I am just going to put a poll in your screen. I'm just interested to know what is the reason that is actually make you consider to buy a property here in the Netherlands. So yeah, in that way, we'll be able to direct you a little bit better as well. So I see a few people are answering. Okay, a few of you want to settle down. That's good. Okay, I also see that the rents are quite high. That's definitely a reason to buy a house. And then there's a small portion of you that would also like to build up equity. Great, thank you very, very much for your answers. That really helps. And of course, we'll discuss further steps and process later on in this presentation. Great. So moving forward, greatness is achieved in the agency of others. This is our motto. And what do we mean by that is that, of course, you will have one point of contact as your agent if you do decide to work with us. But as you see, it is actually the whole team that is working on your files and sort of like guiding the process. So we have Giovanna, which originally comes from Brazil. We have Ludo, who's originally from the Netherlands. We have Rick, who's also from the Netherlands, and together with Ellen. And we also have Rafaela, who comes from Brazil as well. So you see here that even though we are a mixture of races, we all have experiences as expats. So we'll definitely be able to empathize with your situation. So just a little bit about us. We are not traditional real estate agents. What do we mean by that is that we help with buying and renting at the moment. So that means no selling or no letting properties. We charge a fixed rate. So there is no commission on our services, which can turn out to be very handy for a buyer, of course. And we definitely know what it's like to settle in a new country, as we have done that ourselves in the past. What is our added value? So of course, selling agents will take offers from Expat Housing Network more seriously. We can sometimes also book viewings when it is no longer available or possible. Agents will prioritize agents. So in that case, sometimes we're able to get a viewing for you if you're not able to do it yourself. We support, of course, by reviewing all the Dutch legal documents that you will be receiving in the process. We help define the market value through market data. This is a very important point. We'll talk about the market value a little bit later. And of course, we will inform you about the rules and the regulations of your property. Lastly, we will make sure you don't make the same mistakes that we did trying to buy our own house here in the Netherlands. So a little bit more about today. So of course, we're going to talk about the market information in The Hague, some market drivers in general, savings and what you should consider in terms of savings before entering a buying process, and of course 3 tips to win the market. Of course, with that included, the timeline will be discussed as well. So if you have any questions, again, just pop them in the Q&A and my colleague Rick will pick up your questions from there. Perfect. Before we go forward, just to know where exactly in the process are you? So this is not a poll. This is just a question you can answer in the chat. I'm just really curious to see whether you are just orienting, whether you have started searching for a property, whether you have already viewed a property, or whether you have submitted an offer already. I hope that is not the case, because that means things will need to go really fast for you. But I see some answers coming in: search and some viewing, searching, orientation, and search. Okay. So that's pretty good. You're in the right place. Here we'll share a lot of information and knowledge. Again, if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A, and we'll pick them up from there. Perfect. So market information related to The Hague. The first table that you see here is the general price of the Netherlands since 2005. So you can see here that in 2021, the general average selling price was 386,000. And by Q2 in 2022, that has already increased in 448,000 as well. So we definitely see that there's a slower increase in comparison to last year, where the interest rates were, of course, very, very low. But even though the increase is slower, the increase is still there. Moving forward, a little bit more specific on The Hague. This is related to Q3 in 2022. And you see here that the houses that were sold were approximately 3,500. That was 2% from last year and 31% from last quarter. So that's a sharp increase. Of course, the summer times are always the most busy as well for the market, the housing market. Sorry, there we go. Houses for sale, there were 1,167 properties listed on sale. That was 64% from last year and 69% from last quarter. The average price in The Hague has increased to 510. That is 8.8% since last year, but it does remain the same in terms of comparing it to the last quarter. We see that the average price is almost 4,700. That again is almost an 11% from last year, and a slight percentage that has affected the price per square meter since last quarter. The sales time, it remains 21 days. That is actually very, very fast, guys. So just make sure you are prepared and you're aware of the process and the steps, so you just don't get intimidated from it. But 21 days, and that hasn't decreased in numbers since last year or last quarter. Thank God, because 21 days is already too quick. Perfect. Let's talk a little bit about what drives the market. So of course, we have the fiscal benefits. At the moment in the Netherlands, we have the tax exemptions. That means that you will not be paying the 2% transfer tax on the property if, one, you have never bought a home in the Netherlands before. Two, the property you're buying is worth less than 400,000. And three, you are younger than 35. Okay, so 35 doesn't count. You need to be 34 and younger to be able to claim this tax. So it is a nice 2% discount. So if you are in that position and you are eligible to go forward with it, then that might be a good time for you to do it. Currently, we still have the interest rebate. That means that the interest on your mortgage is tax deductible. Of course, that is super nice. You get a small deduction at the end of the year, so that's nice. At the moment, there are no capital gains when you sell your property in the Netherlands. There are some discussions that this might change in the taxes around 24 or 25. No concrete plans yet. But for the moment, if you sell your property, you don't get any taxes on the gain that you have built on it. We also have the tax-free parent donation. That means that this year, you'll be able, if you're a parent and you want to transfer money to your children for the purpose of buying a house, you can do that up to 100,000 tax-free. Next year, that will dramatically drop to 30,000. And from this year, from 2024, that will no longer be possible. So that's also an opportunity for you to grab. If you are in that case, just make sure you talk with the tax authorities because there's the 2023 is very close. there's a small chance that they will only allow you to use the money for a certain amount of time. So just check with them to make sure that you can still get this benefit if you're in this situation. The other thing that would dramatically drive the prices, of course, would be the low interest rates. We've seen that last year, of course, the interest rates were between 1.5 and 2.5, let's say. And that was a very big increase for the housing market here in the Netherlands. Now we see that the interest rates are going a little bit higher. It's between 3 and 4%. Some cases could be a little bit lower. Some cases it could be a little bit higher. But that, of course, had an immediate effect on the housing market. We see that it is slowing down, not decreasing, but for sure, definitely slowing down. Also, high rents. A lot of you, I guess, experience this. Sometimes it is worth perhaps getting in a mortgage, and you'll be probably paying a little bit more on what you're paying on your rent right now, or perhaps slightly lower, but that will give you the benefit of buying a stone of your own house every month. Of course, I'm not saying that renting is bad. It really depends on your situation. But if you are planning to stay for a few more years, then it might be wise to perhaps buy a property, build some equity instead of paying for rent and then leaving with empty hands after that. And of course, the lack of supply. The Netherlands has a big lack of supply. The demand is very, very high, but the supply in housing is quite low. There are several plans in action for new build properties to sort of like address this issue. But of course, yeah, you cannot build a whole complex from one day to another. So it is something that will at least be there for the next 2 to 5 years. So some news regarding a self-occupancy obligation. This was introduced in 2022 in The Hague for properties who has a WOZ value up to 355. And what that means is that it will include a permanent self-occupancy clause. That means that any property with a WOZ value that is less than that amount, you will not be able to rent it out. The reason they're doing this is because it means that private investors are no longer interested to bid on properties on the lower range, which allows the buyer to have a little bit more of a healthy competition. So an average buyer with an average buyer, instead of having to deal with private investors who have loads and loads of cash and are able to make deals a lot more easier. So that's a good thing, but if you are intending to rent the property out at some point, this is definitely something that you need to check out. And in general, not only from this regulation, the Netherlands has quite a lot of restrictions in renting. So if you are planning to rent, then I suggest that you book a meeting with us so we can discuss it and let you know what your options are. Another piece of news, this was from Q1, that the prices in house prices were still increasing by 20%. That indicated a growth in 2022, and that is notable to say that, of course, the pricing index has been well, it's been increasing since 2013, where they consider that to be the very low of the housing market here in the Netherlands. Another one, interest rates to rise. At the end of 2021, they have already predicted that, of course, the interest rates will go higher due to certain events that went a little bit quicker than expected. However, we're seeing that some other European countries are already decreasing their interest rates. It is expected that perhaps this might happen in the Netherlands as well. But what is important is that, of course, the increase has stabilized since Q1. In Q1, the interest rate was tripled, well, doubled or tripled almost. But we see that now it's getting a little bit more of a steady balance there. But of course, that will depend on other factors as well. So let's talk about savings. What do you think you'll need in savings before you start the process? Just pop your answer in the chat. I will be interested to see how much you think you'll be needing to buy a house here in the Netherlands. And of course, once I've seen your answers, I'll go forward and explain this and break down this a little bit more so you know how much you'll need in savings. Okay, so I'm seeing some questions coming in. 25,000, 50K, 20K, 15, 30. Okay, so everyone is pretty much in the similar range. Okay, there's no right or wrong answer at this point. It's just more of understanding what the buying costs mean, and of course, how that will relate to your loan. I see that someone says at least 10% of the house price. I heard. Okay, that's an interesting one. And then 25. Great. Thanks a lot for your answers. Let's first talk about the buying costs. Okay, so I'm talking about the services that you will need to pay in order to be able to complete this process. Okay, so if you take a look at this table, as I mentioned before, you will always need to pay 2% transfer tax, except if you're eligible to not pay it, right? So if you're buying a new build property, then of course you don't pay a transfer tax. If you're younger than 35, then you don't pay the transfer tax, but you will need to be buying up to 400K. And of course that you haven't used this benefit before. Okay, so if you're eligible for that, it means that you will not pay in the 2%. But if you do need to pay the transfer tax, then you will need to calculate a final 2% on your final purchase price, because that will be added as your tax. The notary and you will need a notary. This will be the legal entity to supervise sort of like the process. And they will also be the ones that are transferring the property to you. You will need them for two things. First of all, for the mortgage deed. Of course, if you're buying cash, that means you don't need the mortgage deed, okay? But I'm assuming that you're involved in a mortgage, and the mortgage deed will cost you between 600 and 1,100 euros. It is tax deductible, so you also get a small discount there at the end of the year when you complete your income yearly income form. Important to say that, of course, the suburbs of The Hague will be cheaper in comparison to a notary for a property that's in the city center. So just keep that in mind. The transfer deeds will cost you around the same. The bank or the mortgage broker will cost you between 1,500 and 3,500. That really depends on who you're going to work with. So for example, if you go at your bank, this will be a cheaper service for sure, but you need to keep in mind that you are only limited to the products of the bank. So that's 2 to 3 products that will not be able to give you access to anything else. Now, a mortgage broker, it is a little bit more expensive. Of course, that comes with the quality of the service as well. But the benefit there is that the mortgage advisor has deals with 10 banks, and every bank has their own product. So the mortgage advisor is able to give you a lot more products from different banks. Plus, the benefit that we see a lot of times is that if for any reason your mortgage is disapproved, then a private mortgage advisor can directly apply to another bank for you. Whereas the bank, if you go straight to the bank and then they decline your mortgage, that means that you will need to join another bank and you will need to pay for their service again. So again, let's chat more about this when you have an intake with us. And if you have any questions, we'll break them down. And of course, we will provide you with mortgage advisor details as well. So moving forward, you will need to pay a real estate agent, of course, if you're using one. That is usually between 1 and 2% of the purchase price. As you see here, and as mentioned before, we charge the fixed fee. There's two main reasons that we do that. First of all, you have a lot of expenses to carry as a buyer, so we don't want you to think about how much it will cost you in the end. So just giving you a clean number there to use and calculate your expenses. And secondly, we have many systems in place that might need you to change your offer at the last hour, let's say. And we definitely don't want you to think that because we're suggesting a higher or a lower number, that we are biased because we are paid out in commission. So it's a fixed rate. and then it gives the confidence to you also that we're just working for your benefit, and we're not biased because of any commission involved. An appraiser, you will need an appraiser. If you're using a mortgage, then you will need an appraiser to come and evaluate the property. This will cost you between 650 and 800 euros. A technical inspector, this is optional. It is for you to decide based on the viewing, and of course, after chatting with your agent to see what is recommended for the property. It is usually around 450 euros. You will need an interpreter for the transfer documents because the notary is not allowed to talk to you in any other language except Dutch. So you will need an interpreter in your own language to translate those documents. Usually having an English one is okay. And that will cost between 300 and 350 euros. However, the law states that you're obligated to have it in your native language. That is, of course, for the notary to decide. It is possible that if your language is a little bit more specific and not so international, it could be possible that your translator is also a little bit more expensive. The bank guarantee, it relates to your mortgage. So what does that mean is that you're always obligated to provide a 10% deposit of the purchase price to sort of like seal the deal. That 10%, you're not obligated to do it from your own savings. The bank can do that for you as part of your mortgage. But do keep in mind, if you want the bank to do that, then they will charge a cost for that as well. And last, we have the NHG. This is the National Mortgage Guarantee. It will only apply if your property has a WOZ value of 355 and less. So it depends on the property as well. But if you can get it, then that is only good for you if it is an extra layer of safety, and it is not that expensive, as they usually charge 0.6% of the mortgage account amount, but then that will give you more safety, and that is something that you should discuss with the mortgage advisor so you can understand exactly what that is. So some tips to win the market. So the most important thing, guys, is the value of the property. Why? Because here in the Netherlands, the bank will finance 100% of the value of the property, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is also the purchase price. Okay, so whatever differs from the value and the purchase price, that difference must be covered from your own savings. Let's talk as an example. So you see this property was at an asking price of 395. Now let's take a look. So the asking price is at 395. Please keep in mind that the asking price is not an indication of how much the property is worth or whether that is going to be the sales price or not. Okay, the asking price just sets the minimum that the owner is willing to take for the property, but that price, it's not a golden rule, but most of the times it is placed 10 to 15% below of the value of the house. And of course, it is very important to at least match up the value because, yeah, this is the Netherlands, it is the seller's market. So it would be very, very difficult and very rare to perhaps get something under value. So it is important to first see what the value of the house is. And then, of course, based on that, we do an analysis on the competition and we try to understand whether the price should be higher or not. So this property has an asking price of 395. The market value turns out to be at 415, and you as a buyer bought the property at 435. So the difference between the asking price and the purchase price is 10%. Okay, that's 40K. But you see that the difference between the value and the purchase price is not even 5%. Okay, that's only 20K. That means that you will only need to pay 20K extra from your savings. Of course, assuming that you're allowed to borrow that much money. But you will need to add another 20K to cover the difference. Okay, so in actuality, you're not adding 10%. Again, the asking price is no indication, it's just there to drive the competition. But you see that here you will be assuming you will be adding a 10%, that doesn't mean that that 10% is fully from your own savings. Okay, so understanding the market value is really, really important. Moving forward, now we're talking about the same property. Okay, so they have decided that the asking price should be at 375. The market value remains the same. It is the property that we're talking about, and the purchase price, of course, remains the same. But now you see that the difference between the asking price and the purchase price is 16%. That's 60K. But of course, the difference between the market value and the purchase price remains the same at 4.8% with a 20K. So because there's no indication of what the asking price really is, it is really important to understand that, because if the asking price is already at 415, which is the market value, and then you go and add a 10 or a 15% above that, then you're going beyond the range that you want to be. Okay, so again, that is why it is important to understand the market value when you're making on your offer, so then it is clear to you, okay, this is how much the bank will give me, and this is how much I will need to provide myself. Okay, again, chat with your agent about this. It is different from property to property, but of course, between 90 and 95% of the listings, you will see that the asking price is around 10 to 15% below the market value. So if your budget, if your mortgage is 400, then make sure you're looking below that on the asking price. Otherwise, chances are that you will fall out of your range very soon. Okay. Perfect. Now, what makes a winning offer? Of course, a good price is always very important, but it is not always the highest price that means a good price. Okay, so the seller wants to see security. Okay, so they want to be confident that you're gonna move forward with the deal and that you're actually gonna fall through. Now, one of the ways that you can offer that is, of course, with the conditions that you have in the offer. There are a few conditions you can add. I will only talk about the most important one, that is a financing clause. Please make sure you double check with your mortgage advisor. The financing clause basically means that it protects you as a buyer, and it's basically a statement that says, okay, I agree to buy this property if the value turns out to be an X amount. The amount is, of course, to be decided based on the property analysis and market value. Now, if you have that clause in your offer, you are protected from your mortgage being disapproved later on, okay? But that automatically means that the seller will only know whether you will go forward with the property or not 6 to 8 weeks later, once your bank replies on your mortgage. If you remove this clause, it means that the seller has a lot of security that you're moving forward with it, but it does give you a little bit of a risk that if your mortgage doesn't get approved, then you will obviously not be able to pay for the property. And because you will not be able to go through with what you've signed, you will be entitled to pay a 10% fine to the seller. And that means that the contract is also canceled. Okay, so there is a risk layer for you if you remove it. But this is something you have to discuss with your mortgage advisor. They are the ones who give the green light of whether it is wise to remove the clause or not. But do keep in mind, it's very powerful, okay? We had it many times that our offers were second or third in line, but because we didn't have the financing clause in comparison to the first offer, they chose to go with that with a little bit less money and more security instead of the other way around. Okay, so keep it in mind. Of course, the seller also wants to have the least amount of hassle, right? They're going to receive a lot of offers, and trust me, they're not going to go with the one that complicates things. So for example, if they're already saying to you that the transfer can only happen 6 months later because they're waiting for their new property to be delivered or something like that, don't ask them to do that in 2 weeks, because most probably they won't. Shorter, like 2 months or 3 months. Most probably they won't. They will probably choose to go with someone who's willing to adapt with them. Plus, if it means for them to get out of the house earlier, that means they need to pay somewhere else to stay. So if you really want them to consider that, then you should offer something they can't deny. Okay, so just try and find out more stuff about your owner, and then just try to make it as easy as possible for them, but also for you. And also offer a personal touch. It's always good for them to know, for the selling agent, but also for the owner, to know who you are, to know a little bit more about you. So what we usually do is, of course, provide a little bit of a client profile with a picture of you, and of course, a little bit more of what you want to share. And we've seen that that's actually been helpful. Selling agents remember you at the viewings, and also the owners sometimes are really interested to know who they're selling their house to. Perfect. The last one is due diligence. So what do we mean by that? As a buyer, of course, as I mentioned before, you will have a technical inspector and an appraiser. My question to you at this point would be, when do you think that these experts need to come at the property? Would that be before an offer gets accepted or after an offer gets accepted? You can just pop your answers in the chat. I'm just curious to know, when do you think the technical inspector should come and the appraiser? Is it before you have an offer accepted or after you have an offer accepted? So I see some questions coming in. Before, after, okay, there's a 50-50 agreement there. Oh, before, after, back to 50-50. Okay, this is interesting. This is interesting. After, okay. I'm just going to give a, I don't understand your questions. Harry, okay, Harry, will go back to your question later on, and we'll discuss that a little bit more. Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you for your answers, guys. Here is the sweet spot, is actually right after the offer is accepted. There are many reasons for that. First of all, as I mentioned before, the buying process or the selling process is really fast in the Netherlands. So there will be very few selling agents that will allow you to book an expert and book people to come in and do that for the property if you don't have an offer accepted. That is just one reason. But the second, which is the most important one, is that imagine now that you bring the technical inspector that will cost you 450 euros, and then you will bring the appraiser to evaluate the house that, let's say, on an average 700 euros. Okay, so that's 1.5 that you will need to pay, and you don't even have an offer accepted. Okay, so what if you decide to send an offer and then it gets rejected? You still need to go through with paying those experts. And what if you decide that you don't want to send an offer? You still need to pay for those experts. Okay, so the right moment to do it is directly after an offer gets accepted. Now, I think your question would be, how then do you have insight on those information before you make an offer? And the answer is, make sure you have an agent. Agents will, first of all, make sure that they review the documents of the property. Of course, that is something that we thoroughly do, and we provide you with a lot of information, and we have meetings over that, of course, so we can discuss it. So we do a property document review, which will give you a lot of insight of the state of the house. That's how you decide on whether you want a technical inspection or not. And of course, based on your feeling when you were at the viewing. And second of all, regarding the appraiser, you will only know the exact amount after the appraiser has visited the property. So what we do beforehand to prepare you for this is a price analysis, which is exactly the same approach as any appraiser would use. But the thing is that because the appraiser is the one that needs to submit and certify the report, it will always be that you will know the market value at that point. So beforehand, what we will do is give you a very detailed price analysis of the area, of course, and define the market range, okay, the market value range. And based on that, we calculate on how to make your offers. of course, when you decide to start working with us, we'll have a lot of meetings for every offer, and we'll discuss this in detail more. But that is usually how the process works in general here in the Netherlands. And you see here that once your offer gets accepted, you have around 1.5 weeks until you sign the contract. I can confidently say that this will be a little bit less in The Hague, in general in the main cities. So that would be around 1 week to sign the purchase contract. And then from the moment you're signing the contract, you as a buyer, not the seller, but you as a buyer have a 3 days cooling off period. That means that, for example, if you did decide to have a technical inspection, and then the technical inspection comes out in those 3 days cooling off period, and then you're not happy with the result, or there's something terribly wrong with the property, it means that you can still pull out of the property, of the deal, within those 3 days. If you decide to do that after those 3 days, then you no longer can. And if you want to break the deal, you will need to pay a 10% fine on that. So moving forward a little bit on the timeline. So of course, there's a point where you start searching and viewing properties. That's where most of you are. Right next is, of course, you find a property that you really like, and then you submit an offer for that. Reminder, again, before you submit an offer, what we do for you is two main research. One is the price analysis. This is to help us define the market value and understand the whole financing behind the offer that you're submitting. And secondly, a property document review, which will examine the documents of the property, inform you about regulations, the state of the property, taxes, and anything else that is attached to the property. Then once an offer gets accepted, the first thing to do is to book the experts to come in. Technical inspector is optional. The appraiser will be obligated if you're moving forward with a mortgage, and that is because the bank will only give you 100% of the value of the property, and that is the person who will define the actual value. Any difference from the value of the property in the purchase price must be paid from your own savings, okay? Right after you have the signing of the contract, and then of course, once you have signed the contract, your mortgage application can start immediately. 3 days after you sign, you have your cooling off period ending. And then after that, it usually takes 2 to 4 weeks for your mortgage to get approved, depending on who you work and your situation, of course. And once your mortgage is approved, then you get a statement of completion from the notary. This is just a financial statement that they will lay out all the expenses that you need to pay. Keep in mind that the expenses you will only need to pay at the agreed day where you are becoming the legal owner. The only two things that you will need to pay beforehand is the technical inspector and the appraiser, but the rest of the costs you need to pay by the transfer date. Okay, so if the transfer date is agreed to be in 6 months from now, then that means that most of your costs will be paid in 6 months. I had it once with a client that their transfer date was seriously a year later. And then it meant that they also had 12 months to save a lot more money and pay what they had to do. But of course, they did pay for the inspector and the appraiser beforehand. Okay. With that being said, you receive the statement of completion. Right after that comes the transfer date. This is the agreed date that you become the owner. What happens on that day is that first, you go by the property for a last round of checks, 20 minutes just to check there are no damages when they were moving out, to take the water meeting, the utility meter readings in general, to transfer those on you, and just a last round of checks just to make sure that everything is okay. And then you move at the office of the notary to sign the transfer deed and the mortgage deed, which will make you the owner and the lender, of course, of the property. From that day onwards, the property belongs to you and the mortgage, of course, and that is actually the last step of the buying process. Now, a little bit regarding of our packages. We have the smart and complete packages. I will just explain the difference. Of course, the smart package, you see here that We include the intake. You will have access to a buying manager. We will do the property document reviews with you. We will do the offer submissions. We will do the contract reviews. We will do the third-party bookings for you. And in general, we'll support you and guide you through the process up until the end. We also have the complete package here. The difference with the complete and the smart package is that the complete package is more a physical package. That means that we also schedule and attend the viewings with you. We also not only book the third party meetings, but we also attend the third party meetings. And then, of course, we are there with you on the last day at the last inspection to do the property check, and at the notary's office with you when you're signing your documents. We also have a new build package. This is not for existing properties. This is for new development projects. It is a different process. So if you're interested in that, I suggest you just go on our website and book an intake with us on that. And then we'll just give you a lot of information one-on-one. But for existing properties, you have the smart and the complete package. The interesting thing about our services is that we only charge a 10% non-refundable deposit, and then the rest of the payment is, of course, paid after you have secured a property. If you have more questions about that, we'll be more than happy to talk to you on a one-on-one intake. Perfect. So now we'll move to Q&A. I'll just see whether there are any questions. I don't know, Rick, can you hear us? Are there any outstanding questions here?
Hi. We don't have any questions. Maybe in the chat I had one, Harry. Maybe you can ask your question again, because it was not really clear to me what you meant.
Okay, so I found the question of Harry. Harry, by the way, if you would like to talk, just raise your hand and I'll give you permission to do that. But if not, then just please let me know if I understand your question better. How more market price than asking price is risk for me is asking price is less, then I will be paying less price, right? Okay, so I understand. I think I understand what your question is. Let me just go back to this slide. Again, the difference between the asking price is not the value of the property. Here we are. Okay, so if you see here, again, this property is asked at 395. Okay, that is not the asking price. It is not an indication of how much the property is worth. It can be way higher than the value. It can be at the value, and it can be even lower than the value. Okay, most of the times we see that the asking price is around 10 to 15% below the value of the property. Okay, and in the Netherlands, what you will need to do is first match up the value. So in this example that we have used before, you see that the value is 415, so not 395. That is a almost a 5% difference from the asking price to the market value. And then you first need to match up the market value of the property, because you will probably not be able to buy below that, especially if it's a new property and ready to move in and fully renovated. It will be very difficult to get that below value. And then you see that what's important to see is that, of course, first you match up the value of the property, and then based on the price analysis that we also do for you, you will see how the general competition of the area is. So the properties here in the Netherlands are most of the times are bought above the market value. There is a general saying that goes around that you should always bid 10% above the asking price, but that is not necessarily true, because assuming that the asking price was at the market value, then adding a 10% on that 415,000, that will drive you out of range, and you will probably be buying something a little bit more expensive. It depends on the property and it depends on the area, but again, the asking price is not the value. it is important to understand the value before you make an offer. And then the bank will only give you 100% of the value of the house. If you're offering and your purchase price is higher than the market value, then you will need to cover the difference. And in general, if you do want to be competitive and you want your offers to get it a little bit more taken into consideration, then the best thing you can do is also offer a little bit more about market value. These scenarios can change again from property to property. There are many factors that can influence this. So again, I do suggest that you talk to an agent before you do that so you can fully understand it. So I'm hoping, Harry, that answers your question. Clear, thanks a lot. Great, that's good to know. And then just one last question. Sorry, Rick, I'm taking your role, but I see it here. If we are buying together with a partner and he's below 35 and I am not, how does it go with the transfer tax? Then the transfer tax will be 1%, as it will be only charged on one buyer and not the other one. Okay, so that's how it will be. It's also a nice discount. And then I don't see any more questions.
We do have a few. Let's start with this one. Is it possible to rent out a room if you're purchasing a property?
Yeah, it is way easier to rent out a room in the property than the whole property, but you will need to check that with your mortgage advisor, because it really depends on what are the policies of the mortgage you have. Most mortgage advisors mortgage lenders will allow you to do that, but of course you need to inform them and get a written permission for it. So double check with that. And then also I have seen recently that it is also possible that you will need a permit from the city hall in The Hague, but that does not apply for every property. So just make sure you chat with an agent to find more specific information there.
All right, thank you. Then just to clarify, the market value, is it determined by the appraiser or?
That's a very good question. The WOZ value is not the market value, and the market value is determined by an appraiser. Of course, they cannot put whatever they want. They need to make a report and justify their results. So it is really based on the recent sales of the neighborhood. But the market value is not the WOZ value. Okay, just keep that in mind. WOZ value is more relevant for your taxes. The market value is more relevant for your mortgage. And it will be 99.9% of the times, if not 100%, the WOZ value is way below than the market value. It's just, it takes some time to upgrade it, and yeah, it's just lacking a little bit in comparison to the market value.
All right, thank you. Then another question from Catriona. As the market is cooling down, or is there any impact on the asking price and the final sale price? For example, are people bidding below?
That will depend on the property. So of course, if we're talking of a property that needs to have, I don't know, between 20 and 30K in renovation, then that of course will affect the bidding competition. So those properties are a little bit, yeah, there are people that can offer lower than that. And then in general, with the comparison, the competition is there. It's still there, especially in the cities, in the main cities. But it is many times that it is not as aggressive as last year. That is mostly because of the interest rates. We see that a lot of, because the interest rates automatically affect how much you can borrow, we see that a lot of buyers have decided to perhaps pause their buying process at the moment. So that can also affect the competition. But again, it will also depend on the property itself.
All right. Then a question about our service. Do I still need to pay the bank/mortgage advisor if I hire your service?
Yeah, you will need to do that. The real estate agent will make sure that they sort out the offer for you, negotiate the deal, sign the contracts with you, and like sort of organize everything for the mortgage advisor to be able to pick it up. But you will need a mortgage advisor to apply for a mortgage.
All right, thank you. then how many offers do you need to make in order to purchase a property in The Hague?
That is really a good question, and there is really not a right answer to it. It really depends on how many savings you have. So for example, someone who has 50K can be a lot more flexible than someone who has 5K. So that will depend on the flexibility you have as a buyer as well, based on your finances. But on average, at least from our services, we see that we will have between 2 and 3 offers accepted every 5. So at least our goal is to have 1 offer accepted within the 5. But yeah, again, that will depend on your financing situation as well.
Thank you. Then another question about renting out. Is it possible to rent out a property if I move to another country in a few years? Do banks support this?
If you have a residential mortgage, most probably you'll be able to do that if you are moving out of the country, but they will always have a maximum of that. I'm not sure whether that will be 1 or 2 years. It is something that you need to check with the policy of the mortgage lender you're with. So yeah, most likely you'll be able to go with that, but double check with the mortgage advisor, okay?
Thank you. Then the price we see on advertising websites such as Funda, is that the asking price?
Yes, that is the asking price. And again, the asking price doesn't reflect the value of the house, okay? The asking price is just there. Can be high, can be the same, can be way low. So it's always important to see what the market value is.
Thank you. And then the final question. I heard that once someone makes an offer and it is accepted, they cannot pull out or take it back. Is that true?
Technically, you are not legally binded up until the moment you sign and your 3 days cooling off period have passed. So after those 3 days cooling off period, that is the moment where you can get out. But I really, really, really advise you to not make any offers on properties that you're not willing to buy. Don't try to test your luck like that, because we had it many times that clients did that. And then they decided to pull out of the offer because they didn't really mean it. But the way that that affected them was quite big, because agents do talk to each other. And then if you're looking in a specific area, you'll be dealing with certain agencies. And if those agencies sort of like blacklist you as a buyer, then it will be difficult for you to get an offer accepted. So as a general rule, do not make offers if you're not willing to buy the property, but you're only legally binded after the 3 days cooling off period have passed from the moment you signed. So I hope that clears it up for you.
All right, thank you. I think that's it.
Yeah, just one last question I saw in the chat. What would be the advantage if you offer a more down payment? The 10% is usually fine. If you are a cash buyer and you can provide more deposit, then that might also work to your benefit, of course. But the most important thing, again, is how much you will need as a mortgage. So it's not whether you offer more on the deposit, you only need to do 10% and the bank can cover that for you. But if you're in a position where you can add a lot more cash to the offer, then it's good to show them that you don't need a full mortgage, you only need 50% of the mortgage, and that doesn't necessarily need to affect the deposit. The 10% as a deposit is pretty much standard. So I hope that helps you out. If you have any questions, guys, please keep in mind that this will be is recorded and will be shared with you. You receive this presentation and you will receive also a page in the presentation where you can go forward and book a meeting with us so we can talk more about it. No obligations or strings attached. Just feel free to come and talk to us to see what your specific situation is, so then we can advise you. But then, of course, if you do have any more questions, you can also reply to the email that we'll send you perhaps tomorrow or Monday, and then we can take it from there. So for now, thank you very much, guys, for attending, and thank you very much, Rick, for the questions and answering. I see that we had quite a few, so that is super nice. I hope we helped you and you have at least gained some knowledge from us today.
All right. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye, guys.